My name is Evelyn Carter, and I've lived in the same house for 57 years. It's the only place that's ever really known me. Truly known me. From the first day I became a wife to the last day I stood alone in the kitchen, watching the sun slip across the worn floorboards. The white farmhouse sits on a quiet stretch of Maple Ridge Lane, where the air still smells of rain and lilac every spring. The porch paint has peeled, the shutters hang crooked, and the steps moan under my weight, but it's home. It always was. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear Tom's old truck rumbling up the gravel drive, the sound that once told me everything was fine in the world. He passed away 11 years ago, a quiet heart attack on a Sunday morning. I still remember the way the coffee cup tipped from his hand, spilling across the table, as if time itself had slipped. Since that day, I've kept his favorite mug in the cabinet even though I can't bring myself to use it. It's chipped now, but somehow that makes it more honest. After Tom died, the house became quieter. Too quiet at first. For months, I filled the silence by cleaning. Every creak of the floorboards felt like an echo of him. I'd polish the same shelf twice, dust the same vase 3 times. Anything to feel needed again. My daughter, Lauren, came by every few weekends in those first years. She'd bring me groceries or sometimes flowers, always tulips. Tom used to say tulips were the humble optimists of the garden. Lauren remembered that, but over the years her visits grew shorter and her eyes more distracted. She'd arrive with her phone pressed to her ear, apologizing for work calls, then rush off with the promise of next time. I told myself it was normal. Children grow busy, they build their own lives. But a mother knows when distance is more than geography. The last real conversation we had, the kind that lingers in your bones, was 3 years ago. We were sitting on the back porch, the air thick with August heat. I had made lemonade just like always. She wasn't drinking hers. She'd asked about the house, how much I thought it might be worth now that the town was expanding. There was a development going up down the road, a new grocery store, a gas station. She spoke in numbers, square footage, property value, investment potential. I answered in memories, the scratch marks on the pantry door where we'd measured her height every birthday. The dent in the hallway wall where Tom once tripped carrying in a Christmas tree. At one point, she sighed and said, "Mom, you're sentimental to a fault." I laughed softly and said, "And you're practical to a fault." Neither of us knew those words would come back to haunt me. The truth is, I was proud of Lauren. Still am. She was always clever, always determined. She'd worked her way through law school while raising her own little boy, Charlie, after her husband left. I thought her strength came from me, though I see now that strength and silence often look the same. Sometimes, I'd catch myself watching her the way I used to when she was small, her shoulders tight, eyes focused, always trying to be enough for everyone. But I never asked her the questions I should have. About her bills, her long hours, that edge in her voice that wasn't there before. I thought I was giving her space. Maybe I was just afraid of what I'd find if I looked too close. The day everything began to shift was a Thursday morning in March. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that nips at your nose but smells faintly of earth waking up. I just brewed a pot of coffee when I heard the mail truck outside. Doug, our mailman, had been on this route for nearly 20 years. He liked to chat, mostly about weather or the Cardinals' latest losing streak. "Big envelope for you today, Miss Evelyn," he said, handing it over with his usual grin. "Looks important." I smiled, thanked him, and set it on the counter beside the coffee pot, planning to open it later. It sat there all day while I cleaned, while I baked a small loaf of banana bread, even while I sat down to watch my afternoon show. I remember thinking, I'll open it after dinner. Funny how something so small can sit in plain sight, waiting to change your life. That night, after washing the dishes, I finally opened it. I wish I could tell you I remember the sound of the paper tearing, or the way the kitchen light flickered, or the exact moment my heart cracked. But all I really remember is the silence that followed. Inside were neatly stacked documents, legal language I didn't fully understand, stamped and signed. At the top of the page, in bold letters, it read, "Notice of Property Transfer, Carter Residence, 1453, Maple Ridge Lane." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a renewal notice or insurance update? But as I read further, each sentence cut deeper. Ownership transferred to Lauren M. Carter, primary signatory. Sale finalized. New deed recorded. Transfer payment confirmed. My name was there, but not as owner, only as former occupant. I remember setting the paper down on the counter, my hands trembling. My chest felt tight like the air had thickened around me. I thought of the tulips Lauren had brought last spring, now long wilted. I thought of how she'd asked about the house's value. And then I thought of her last message. Love you, Mom. Don't worry about anything. I've got it handled. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. My coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't stand up to pour it out. By the time I gathered the strength to call her, it was past midnight. She didn't answer. Her voicemail came on, cheerful, rushed, distant. I hung up before the beep. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was paperwork for refinancing. Maybe it was something temporary. But in my heart, I already knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through every room of the house like a ghost in my own life. The hallway light flickered faintly, casting soft shadows across the family photos. There was one of Lauren at 5 years old, missing her front teeth, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Another from her graduation day, her eyes bright with possibility. Standing there, I whispered to the photos as if they could answer me. What happened to us? In the quiet, I could almost hear Tom's voice, patient, kind, the way he used to sound when something broke in the house. Let's not jump to conclusions, Evie, he'd say. There's always a reason. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. I finally went out to the porch, wrapped in my old cardigan. The night was cool and still. The rosebush Tom planted when Lauren was born had begun to sprout again, thin stems pushing through the soil. I knelt down, running my hand across the dirt, feeling the life underneath. That's when I found something cold, metal, buried near the roots. It was Tom's wedding ring. I'd buried it there the day after his funeral when I couldn't bear to see it anymore. I had forgotten. Or maybe I hadn't. Maybe part of me knew I'd need it again someday. I slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting. And as I sat there in the dark, under the soft hum of the porch light, I whispered, "Help me understand. Tom, please." I didn't know it then, but the truth wasn't written in those papers. It was buried much deeper, beneath the floorboards, beneath the years of silence, in the place I least expected to find it. The basement. The next morning, I called Lauren again. This time she answered, her voice crisp, hurried, professional. Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later? No, I said, trying to steady my tone. We need to talk now. There was a pause on the line, the kind that stretches and tightens until you can almost hear someone's heartbeat through it. I got a letter, I said softly. From the county office. It says the house has been transferred. To your name. And sold. Her sigh on the other end sounded like a door closing. Mom, I was going to explain. When? I asked. Before or after I was supposed to pack my life into boxes? She didn't answer. I could hear papers rustling in the background, the clatter of a keyboard. The sound of her world, busy, practical, fast. Mine felt frozen, small, shrinking by the second. Finally, she said, "You'll have somewhere to stay. I already arranged a place for you near the lake. It's temporary, but it's nice. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder than it needs to be." Those words settled in my chest like ice. I swallowed hard. Lauren, you had no right. I did, Mom. Legally, I did. We both signed the joint deed years ago, remember? When Dad passed, we updated it together. I've been handling the property taxes ever since. It's all above board. Her voice was flat, controlled. That tone lawyers use when they want to end a conversation before it starts. I wanted to yell. To cry. To make her hear the sound of what she'd done. But all I could manage was a whisper. You sold your father's house. The one he built with his own hands. She exhaled sharply. It's just a building, Mom. Please, don't make this sentimental. Sentimental? I repeated, my voice cracking. This is where you learned to walk, Lauren. Where you said your first word. Where we buried your dog under the maple tree. You think this is just wood and nails? There was a soft sound and maybe a sob she tried to hide. But before I could say more, the line went dead. She had hung up. I stood there with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Just the empty hum of a life that had suddenly become unrecognizable. For the next few days, I moved through the house like a stranger. Every creak of the floorboard felt like a warning. Every shadow a memory I couldn't hold on to. I'd always imagined growing old here, having tea on the porch, reading books in the sunroom, keeping Tom's garden alive for as long as my hands would allow. The idea of leaving felt impossible, like asking a tree to uproot itself and walk away, but betrayal doesn't come with a choice. It comes with paperwork. The real estate agent showed up 3 days later, a young man with perfect teeth and polished shoes that left no mark on the hardwood floor. He smiled too much. His voice was rehearsed, kind in that detached, transactional way. "Mrs. Carter, I just need to take a few photos for the listing verification," he said, glancing around the living room. "Lovely home. Lots of character? That's what people say when something is old but not useful anymore." He didn't see the memories, the grooves Tom carved into the staircase rail to fix a wobble, the faint outline of crayon on the hallway wall from Lauren's first drawing. He just saw potential for renovation. I let him take his pictures. What else could I do? That evening, I sat in Tom's old armchair and stared out at the yard. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting long, soft shadows across the grass. The rose bush shimmered in the fading light. A single petal fell to the ground, quiet, graceful, final. When Lauren didn't call again, I tried reaching out to Marjorie, my neighbor for over 30 years. She brought me soup and comfort, both of which I could barely taste. "She's probably in a tough spot," Marjorie said gently. "Maybe she needed the money." "These things happen," I nodded, though her words stung. "These things happen. Not to mothers and daughters who used to finish each other's sentences. Not to people like us." That night, I went through old boxes, things Tom and I had saved in the attic. There were letters tied with ribbon, Lauren's report cards, photographs of her first piano recital. One picture caught me, Tom holding baby Lauren, both laughing. She was reaching for his face, and he was looking at her like she was the entire sky. How could that same little girl grow into a woman who'd sign away everything he built? I cried for the first time that night. Not the kind of cry that comes from sadness, but the kind that comes from something deeper, the sound of something breaking inside you. The next morning, I went to see Mr. Pike, the local lawyer. He'd handled Tom's estate years ago. His office still smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents I brought. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," he said quietly. "She had the authority. You both signed co-ownership after Tom's passing. It gives her the right to sell, even without your explicit consent." I felt the words like stones in my stomach. "But it was our home," he sighed, closing the file gently. "I understand. But legally, her name gives her control. I can file for a review if you'd like, but I don't think it will change much." I stared at the papers. The lines blurred. My signature sat beside hers, faded, forgotten, used against me. When I left his office, the world outside looked the same. People walking dogs, children biking home from school, the smell of someone's dinner wafting through the air. But everything inside me had shifted. It's strange how quickly life can turn. One week you're planning to plant tulips, and the next you're planning where to store memories you can't bear to pack. I started putting things into boxes, slowly, carefully, not just clothes or dishes, but pieces of myself. The sound of tape tearing over cardboard was like a metronome to my grief. Lauren didn't come to help. She sent a moving company instead. When they arrived, 2 young men, polite and detached, I gave them lemonade and stood by as they carried away the furniture Tom built with his own hands. Every thud of a chair leg against the doorframe made me flinch. When they were done, the living room stood empty, hollow. Even my footsteps echoed differently, sharper, lonely. I remember sitting down on the bare floor that night. The moonlight spilled through the window, cold and clean. I whispered to the silence, "Why, Lauren?" The refrigerator still hummed, the old clock still ticked, as if mocking me, the house still alive, even as it was dying. On the last night before I was to leave, I couldn't sleep. I walked through each room, touching walls, whispering goodbyes. In the kitchen, I traced the small burn mark on the counter where Lauren once set down a hot pan at 12 years old. In the hallway, I ran my fingers over the pencil marks that measured her height, the last one from when she turned 17. And then, for reasons I can't explain, I found myself drawn to the basement door. It was the one part of the house I'd avoided since Tom passed. The air down there always felt heavier, colder, like the earth remembered what I'd tried to forget. I switched on the light. It flickered once before holding steady. As I stepped down, the smell of dust and old concrete filled the air. My footsteps echoed against the stone walls. And then I noticed it. A small, rectangular patch of cement near the far corner of the basement. The color didn't match. It was slightly darker, smoother, like it had been freshly poured. I knelt down, brushing my hand over it. The texture was wrong. Too new. For the first time since Tom's death, I felt something stir inside me. Not sadness, not anger, but curiosity. A need to understand. Whatever had been taken from me upstairs, maybe something waited here. Buried under the floor, quiet and patient. Something that could finally tell me why. I didn't sleep that night. The image of that strange patch of cement in the basement stayed fixed in my mind, glowing behind my closed eyes like a memory that refused to fade. By dawn, I had made up my mind. I needed to know what was under there. But the morning brought more than sunlight. It brought the movers. A large truck pulled into the driveway, its brakes hissing like a sigh. A man stepped out with a clipboard in hand. His voice was friendly but impersonal, the way people sound when they're being paid to handle someone else's loss. "Mrs. Carter? We're here for the furniture pickup. Your daughter scheduled it for today." For a moment, I just stood in the doorway, speechless. My daughter had scheduled my move, without even asking if I was ready. The men started hauling boxes, their footsteps heavy on the porch steps. I watched them carry away the rocking chair Tom built for me when Lauren was born, the one that had sat by the window for almost 4 decades. When they lifted it, a small squeak escaped from one of its legs, the same sound it used to make when I rocked Lauren to sleep. The memory hit me so hard I had to turn away. Marjorie, my neighbor, came over again, holding her ever-faithful soup pot. "I thought you might forget to eat," she said, setting it on the counter. Her eyes flicked toward the boxes stacked near the door. "You're really leaving?" "I don't have a choice," I said quietly. She reached out, squeezing my arm. "You always have a choice, Evelyn. Maybe not about what happens, but about how you carry it." Her words were kind, but they fell against the weight in my chest like pebbles against stone. When the truck finally pulled away, the house looked bare, stripped of its life. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than ever, marking each second as if counting down to something I couldn't see yet. That afternoon, I decided to go back down to the basement. The stairs creaked under my feet, the air growing cooler as I descended. The single light bulb overhead buzzed faintly, casting a weak yellow glow that left the corners in shadow. I crouched near that odd patch of cement again. This time I was ready. From the old toolbox on the shelf, I found Tom's hammer and a narrow chisel, both coated with years of dust. My hands trembled as I held them. I'd never been one for fixing things, not like he was. But I could hear his voice in my head. "It's just a surface, Evie. Beneath every surface, there's something waiting to be found." The first tap of the chisel against the cement echoed like a heartbeat. Then another. And another. The sound was strangely rhythmic, almost comforting. The top layer began to flake away, revealing lighter concrete underneath, but not for long. After a few minutes, the tool struck something hollow. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Carefully, I chipped away the edges until I uncovered a small section of wood, smooth, rectangular, like a lid. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a shoebox. But in that moment, it felt monumental. I hesitated before lifting it. My heart thudded in my chest as I pried the lid open. Inside, wrapped in a plastic sheet, were several envelopes, old, creased, sealed with tape. Each one had my name written in Lauren's handwriting. The sight of her handwriting, so familiar, so painfully hers, made my knees weak. I sat right there on the cold floor, the envelopes spread before me like fragile relics. I opened the first one. Her words spilled out like confessions. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I thought I could fix everything before you ever found out." I pressed a hand to my mouth. My vision blurred. The letter went on to explain how she'd been drowning in debt. Medical bills, business loans, credit cards. After her husband left, she had taken out loans against the house to keep afloat. When those spiraled out of control, the only option left was to sell. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd try to save me, even if it meant losing yourself again," she wrote. "You already gave up too much for me once. I couldn't let you do it again." I felt the air leave my lungs. My anger, my confusion, all of it tangled into something heavier, grief. I opened another letter, then another. Some were older, written years before the sale. They talked about her health, the exhaustion, the doctor visits she never mentioned, the fear that something was seriously wrong. In one, she said, "If I get sick again, I don't want you to worry. I'll make sure you're taken care of. The house can do that, even if I can't." Her handwriting was shaky in that one, the ink smeared in places like she'd cried while writing it. I lost track of time down there. The world above me, the half-empty rooms, the echoing silence, all disappeared as I sat surrounded by her words. I think part of me wanted to be angry again, to cling to the betrayal. Anger is easy. It keeps you upright. But those letters, they stripped me bare. They made me remember every moment I'd ever looked at her and thought she was invincible. Maybe she'd just been pretending. Maybe we both had. When I finally climbed back upstairs, the light outside had faded to dusk. The walls glowed amber with the last touch of sun. I looked around the hollow living room, and for the first time, it didn't feel like she'd taken everything from me. It felt like she'd been trying, in her own broken way, to protect me. Still, there was so much I didn't understand. If she loved me enough to write those letters, why bury them? Why not just tell me? That night, I called her again. She didn't answer. So I left a message. "Lauren," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I found the letters. All of them. I just need to know why you couldn't come to me." The next morning, I woke to a text. "Mom, please. Don't hate me. I'll explain soon." I promised, but she didn't. Days passed. The house was scheduled for final inspection before the new owners took over. I had to leave before the weekend. Mr. Pike, the lawyer, came by one last time to drop off paperwork. He noticed the envelopes on the kitchen table. "You found something?" he asked. I nodded. "Letters. From my daughter." He hesitated, adjusting his tie. "Then maybe there's more to this story than contracts and deeds." After he left, I went outside to the rose bush again. The wind was cold, scattering dried petals across the porch. I knelt down, brushing the soil with my fingertips, remembering the ring I'd found days earlier, the one I had buried with Tom. It glinted faintly in the light, worn but whole. I realized then that love doesn't vanish when it's betrayed. It lingers, sometimes quietly, sometimes painfully, in the things we build, even when those things are taken from us. The movers would come again soon to finish clearing the house. I'd be gone before the weekend. But before I left, I promised myself I'd get answers. Lauren had buried something in that basement, not just letters, but truth, and I wasn't leaving until I uncovered every last piece of it. 3 days later, I stood in the empty kitchen, the echo of my own footsteps filling the space where life once lived. Every sound was too clear. The hum of the old refrigerator, the sigh of the heater, the whisper of wind through the window crack. The movers had come and gone. The house felt stripped bare, but I wasn't ready to hand it over yet. Not until I understood everything. Lauren still hadn't come. She'd texted once more, just a simple, "Please don't be here Friday. I'll take care of it." There was something final about those words that made my chest tighten. I decided I wouldn't leave. That morning, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with her letters spread before me like puzzle pieces. Each one was raw, full of guilt and love tangled together, but incomplete. There had to be something more, something she hadn't said. My eyes drifted to the basement door again. I hadn't noticed it before, but the light switch plate next to it was newer than the rest. White plastic instead of the yellowed ivory that had been there for decades. Tom would have hated that mismatch. He noticed details like that. Curious, I ran my finger along the edge of the plate. It moved slightly, loose. Something inside clicked. I unscrewed it with the small screwdriver from Tom's old toolbox. Behind the switch was a hollow cavity, and inside it, another envelope. This one wasn't sealed. My name was written shakily, as if in a hurry. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Mom, if you found this, then I didn't get the chance to tell you myself. Please don't hate me. I was sick again, worse this time. I didn't want to burden you like I did before. The doctor said I might have months, maybe a year. I didn't want you spending it watching me fade." The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. I sank into the nearest chair, clutching the paper to my chest. She was sick. All the strange things she'd done, the rushed sale, the secrecy, the avoidance, they weren't just mistakes. They were desperate acts from a daughter trying to protect her mother from pain. But as I read on, a darker truth emerged. I didn't sell the house for the money. I sold it to pay off what I owed, and to hide what was left for you. I couldn't keep it in my account, they would have taken it. Look in the basement again. Under the old rug by the boiler. I left something there for you. My breath caught. The basement again. Always the basement. I didn't even realize I was moving until I was already halfway down the stairs, the air cool against my skin. The old rug she mentioned, a faded red one Tom had used to keep his boots on, was still there. I knelt and pulled it aside. The floor beneath it looked ordinary, but something about the tiles seemed off. They were newer than the rest. I pried at the corner with my fingers until one tile came loose, revealing a small metal box underneath. My heart pounded as I lifted it out. It was heavy. The latch stuck at first, but when it finally gave way, I gasped. Inside were stacks of cash wrapped neatly with bank slips, several sealed envelopes, and, to my surprise, a folded document with the name Evelyn Carter Trust typed across the top. I didn't understand. I opened one of the envelopes. It was a cashier's check made out to me for nearly $80,000. Another envelope contained property documents, but not for this house. For a small cottage in Vermont, the final note in the box was short. Mom, I know this isn't what you would have wanted, but I wanted to give you somewhere peaceful, somewhere that's yours, safe, debt-free. Please forgive me for how I did it. I thought I was buying you peace. My hand shook so badly I had to sit down on the cold cement floor. She had sold our family home. To save me, it wasn't greed. It wasn't selfishness. It was love, misguided, painful love. And then I remembered the tone of her last text. Please don't be here Friday. Friday was today. I grabbed my coat and keys, heart pounding as I ran to my car. I didn't know where she was, but I had one clue. The name of a hospital printed faintly on one of the medical bills she'd left in the box. St. Mary's, 2 towns over. The drive felt endless. Every red light, every slow car, each second felt like it was slipping away. When I finally reached the hospital, the receptionist looked up with a gentle smile. Can I help you? Yes, I managed, breathless. Evelyn Carter. She was a patient here. Please, is she still admitted? The woman's expression softened, and that was all the answer I needed before she even spoke. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said quietly. She passed away early this morning. For a moment, everything inside me went silent. No sound, no air, just stillness. The kind of stillness that feels like the world has stopped turning. I don't remember how long I stood there, gripping the counter, trying to breathe through the ache in my chest. The nurse guided me to a small waiting room, offered water and then a small envelope. She asked us to give this to her mother, the nurse said softly. I stared at it, my hands trembling as I took it. Inside was a letter. Her handwriting again, softer this time, shaky but steady enough. Mom, if you're reading this, I didn't make it to Friday. I hope you found what I left for you. I hope you understand that I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to protect you from the pain I knew was coming, from me, from everything. Tears streamed down my face. When I was little, I used to think this house was magic, that it kept us safe. But it wasn't the house, it was you. You built a home wherever you stood. I sold it because I didn't want it to become a place of loss. I wanted your memories of it to stay alive, untouched. And the cottage? I hoped you'd start over there. I'll be with you, in every creak of the floor, every morning coffee by the window, always. The letter ended simply, love, forever, your girl, Lauren. I pressed the paper to my lips. Whispering her name, the nurse sat beside me silently, a hand on my shoulder. She talked about you, she said quietly. Said you were her best friend. That night, I drove home. Not the house that was mine, but the house that had been hers to let go of. I sat in the driveway for a long time, watching the light fade from the windows. The home she sold wasn't just walls and memories anymore. It was the story of 2 women who loved each other too much to let the other suffer. I walked back inside one last time. The moonlight slipped through the kitchen window, touching the floor where I used to dance with her as a child. I could almost hear her laugh echoing off the walls, bright, young, alive, and in that moment I realized something. She hadn't taken the house from me. She had given me a new beginning, one she would never get to see. The next morning, I packed my things. The keys rested on the counter next to her last letter. Before I left, I whispered into the quiet, "I forgive you, sweetheart. You were right, it was never the house. It was always us." Then I stepped outside, locking the door behind me, carrying her love and her secret into the dawn. The morning after Lauren's funeral, the house stood still. Not empty anymore, just still. I walked through each room slowly, touching the edges of door frames, tracing the grooves on the old banister Tom built when Lauren was 12. The smell of dust and faint rose perfume hung in the air. Hers, always hers. I had thought that selling the house meant losing everything that tethered me to my past. But now, standing in its quietness, I realized it wasn't leaving me. It was releasing me. The new owners were set to arrive in a few days, a young couple expecting their first child. The lawyer, Mr. Pike, had called earlier that morning to say all documents were finalized. "They're good people," he'd said. "They fell in love with the place the moment they saw it. Good, that was how it should be." Houses like this, houses built from laughter and heartbreak and late-night lullabies, deserved to be lived in. Still, I wanted to say goodbye properly. I started in the kitchen. The walls bore faint outlines where photographs once hung. Lauren on her first day of school, Tom grinning in his gardening hat, our last Christmas all together before he passed. I stood in that space and whispered to it softly, "Thank you." In the living room, I ran my hand across the window ledge where Lauren used to watch thunderstorms, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. She used to be so afraid of them until Tom told her, "Thunder's just heaven clapping for the rain." After that, she'd always smile when the sky shook. Every memory felt sharper now, but not painful. Just tender. When I reached the basement one last time, I paused at the top of the stairs. The air down there had changed somehow, lighter, as if the weight of the secrets once buried beneath that cement had lifted. I walked down carefully, the light bulb humming above. The small box Lauren had left was still open on the workbench. I didn't take the money or the documents, not yet. I just stood there reading the letter again under the weak yellow light. Her words no longer felt like apologies. They felt like a bridge. That evening, Marjorie came by again, carrying her usual soup and a loaf of homemade bread. She was one of those people who didn't need to say much to fill a room with warmth. She sat at the kitchen table watching me pack the last few dishes. "So," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Vermont, huh?" I smiled faintly. "Vermont." She nodded, folding her hands around her teacup. "Lauren would have liked that. She always said you belonged somewhere green. Somewhere with quiet mornings." "She knew me too well," I said softly. Marjorie reached across the table, her wrinkled hand covering mine. "You did good by her, Evelyn. Don't let guilt tell you otherwise. She made her choices out of love." I swallowed hard, nodding. "I think I finally understand that." After she left, I went upstairs and opened the small box Lauren had hidden again. I looked through the trust papers more carefully this time. It wasn't just money she'd left me, it was security. A small but steady account meant to cover property taxes, living costs, and even health insurance. She had thought of everything, and tucked in the very bottom of the box was something I hadn't noticed before. A tiny USB drive labeled Home Videos. I hesitated, then plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered, and suddenly, there she was. Lauren, maybe in her late 30s, sitting on the back porch, sunlight in her hair. She was laughing, really laughing, holding her phone up to record herself. "Mom," she said into the camera, "if you ever find this, it means I chickened out of saying what I wanted to say in person." Her laugh softened. "You're my home, Mom. You always have been. I'm sorry for the mess I made of things. I just wanted to leave something good behind." The video cut to another clip. Her walking through the garden, touching the roses, humming. Then another, her sitting at the kitchen table, late at night, eyes red from crying. "If you ever doubt how much I love you," she whispered, "just remember, I tried to save the only person who ever saved me." The video ended with her blowing a kiss toward the camera. I pressed my palm to the screen, whispering through my tears, "You did save me, sweetheart." You did. That night, I slept in my old bedroom one last time. I left the window open, and the sound of the crickets and wind carried me into sleep. When morning came, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor, golden and soft. I made myself one last cup of coffee in the kitchen. The same chipped mug Tom gave me on our 10th anniversary. On its side, faded but still readable, it said, "Home is where you're loved." I packed it last. As I closed the door behind me, I didn't look back right away. I stood on the porch, breathing in the air, listening to the faint rustle of leaves. The house didn't feel like a loss anymore. It felt like a memory made whole. The drive to Vermont was long but peaceful. The road wound through forests and small towns, past lakes that mirrored the sky. When I finally reached the cottage, it was exactly as Lauren's papers had described. Small, white, with blue shutters and a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. Inside, it smelled faintly of cedar and paint. The walls were bare, but sunlight filled every corner. On the kitchen counter sat a single envelope with my name written on it. I smiled. She had thought of everything. "Welcome home, Mom," it read. "This is your place now. Rest here. Plant something new." I set the letter down, walked out onto the porch, and sat on the swing. The trees whispered softly in the breeze. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't ache. It healed. In the weeks that followed, I started over. Quietly, slowly. I planted rose bushes by the porch, just like the ones from the old garden. I framed a still from her video and set it on the mantel, Lauren smiling. Sunlight behind her, hand over her heart, every morning. I'd make 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for her, and sit outside watching the sun climb over the trees. I'd tell her about the weather, the birds, the soup Marjorie mailed me in care packages. It felt silly sometimes talking to the air, but I swear I could almost hear her laughter drift back with the wind. One evening, I got a call from Mr. Pike. "I wanted you to know," he said. "The couple who bought your house? They had their baby yesterday." "A girl." A smile spread through me before I even realized it. "A girl," I repeated. "Then the house will have laughter again." "Exactly," he said. Lauren would have liked that. After we hung up, I sat for a long while watching the stars come out. The air smelled like roses and rain. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled gently across the horizon, heaven clapping for the rain, just like Tom used to say. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. Not really. Love doesn't stay trapped in walls or photographs or even words. It becomes the air you breathe, the wind that touches your face, the peace that finally finds you after a storm. Lauren had given me that peace, not by keeping me safe from pain, but by teaching me to walk through it and still see light on the other side. When I closed my eyes that night, I whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, my girl, for everything, for letting me go, and for coming back in all the ways that matter." And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of loss. Only light. Only home. It's been almost a year now since I left the house, the one I thought I could never live without. Funny how time softens even the sharpest memories. The cottage in Vermont has become home in ways I never expected. It's smaller, quieter, surrounded by pine trees and the sound of a nearby creek that hums softly through the nights. The air here smells different, like damp earth, lilacs, and peace. Most mornings, I sit on the porch with my cup of coffee, wrapped in a shawl, and watch the light spill through the trees. I always make 2 cups. Old habits die hard. One for me, and one for Lauren. I talk to her sometimes about simple things. The neighbors who wave when they drive by. The chipmunks who've made a nest under my porch. The new roses that bloomed last week despite the late frost. It might sound foolish, talking to the air like that, but out here, silence listens kindly. There are moments when I swear I can feel her near. That small rush of warmth at my shoulder. That flicker in the wind when the leaves shift all at once. I used to think grief was something you carried, a heavy stone you had to bear until you broke under it. But now I know. Grief isn't the weight. Love is. And love, no matter how much time passes, doesn't go anywhere. It just changes shape. Some days, I drive into town to volunteer at the little library. It's run by a woman named Clara, maybe in her 40s, with the same quick laugh Lauren had. We've grown close. She reminds me gently that life still happens in small, beautiful ways even after the big losses. Sometimes when we close the library, I see her teenage daughter waiting outside, scrolling on her phone, sighing at her mother's lateness, the same way Lauren used to. And it makes me smile. Life repeats itself in tender patterns. One afternoon, Clara brought over a box of donated books. Inside, I found an old copy of Anne of Green Gables, Lauren's favorite when she was 10. She used to lie on the porch swing, reading for hours, declaring she was a kindred spirit, just like Anne. I took that as a sign. I placed the book on my shelf, right between Tom's old gardening guide and my worn recipe book. Every object here has a heartbeat now. The cottage doesn't echo anymore. It hums, it breathes. It's filled with the sound of living again. Creaks, laughter, birdsong. Sometimes the neighbor's little boy runs up to my porch to show me his drawings. He calls me Miss Evelyn. He doesn't know my story. He just knows there's an old lady at the end of the lane who gives him cookies and listens. And that's enough. I used to think my story ended the day Lauren sold the house. That everything after would just be surviving. But I was wrong. It wasn't the end. It was the start of another chapter I didn't know I was strong enough to write. The hardest part about loss isn't saying goodbye. It's learning to live in the spaces after. The mornings when you expect a voice that never comes, the holidays that feel quieter, the empty chair across the table. But if you stay still long enough, if you breathe through the ache instead of running from it, you start to feel something else moving underneath. Grace. Grace for the ones who hurt you. Grace for the mistakes you made. Grace for the life that still wants to hold you, even when you think it can't. When I first arrived here, I couldn't imagine planting anything again. I thought the earth would reject me, that it belonged to another life. But that spring, I knelt in the soil with trembling hands and planted 3 rose bushes. One for Tom, one for Lauren, and one for the version of myself that had finally learned how to forgive. Now, those roses bloom brighter than any I've ever grown. The pink one opens first every May, followed by the deep red, Tom's favorite. And then the white one, late but strong. I like to think they're all still talking to each other in their own quiet language. Every evening before sunset, I walk down to the creek. The water glimmers like glass, moving slow and sure. I toss in petals sometimes, little offerings. It feels like sending letters to heaven. The other day, I received a letter in return, though not from above. It came from the young couple who bought my old house. They wrote to tell me how much they loved it, how their baby girl took her first steps in the living room last week, how the garden roses had come back fuller than before. The wife said she often felt a strange warmth in the kitchen when she brewed her morning coffee. As if someone is standing there smiling. I smiled too when I read that. Maybe that's Lauren, visiting the house she once loved, the one she protected in her own flawed way. Maybe she's just making sure another mother gets to build her memories in peace. I think that's what life is, a cycle of letting go and being found again. We all hide things in basements, don't we? Letters we're afraid to send, feelings we don't know how to name, truths we bury because they hurt too much to face. But eventually, someone opens the door, walks down those stairs, and shines a light. And maybe that's how healing really begins, not when we forget, but when we finally stop being afraid to look. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I rewatch Lauren's video, the one she recorded before she died. Her laugh still fills the cottage like sunlight through glass. And when she says, "You were my home, Mom," I whisper back to the screen, "And you were mine." Then I turn off the light, open the window, and let the sound of the night in, the creak, the wind, the whisper of leaves. That's the thing about love. It doesn't leave when people do. It lingers in the rooms, the air, the words left behind. It waits patiently for us to notice, and once we do, once we finally see it, the world feels whole again. I suppose that's why I wanted to tell this story. Not to make anyone cry or to dwell on what I lost, but to remind someone, maybe you, that love doesn't vanish when life changes. It just moves homes. And sometimes, when you least expect it, it finds its way back through a letter, a rose, or the sound of a voice you thought you'd never hear again. So if you're sitting there tonight, holding on to something you can't understand, a loss, a betrayal, a silence, don't turn away from it. Open it, face it. There might be something beautiful buried beneath it, waiting for you, just like there was for me. And when you find it, forgive yourself for taking so long. Healing doesn't come fast. It comes softly, one sunrise, one kind word, one deep breath at a time, because even after the storm, there's always a place where the light returns, and when it does, it doesn't just fill the house, it fills you. If my story touched you, tell me in the comments what home means to you. Maybe it's a place. Maybe it's a person, or maybe it's the part of you that finally learns to forgive. Don't forget to subscribe to Never Too Old for more stories about love, loss, and the courage to begin again.